So we're going to spend some time on the wonderful world of succulents. I am not a succulent expert. I'm an enthusiast, but I'm not an expert. And the reason why I love succulents is because I do well with plants that thrive on neglect. I have a hard time with other plants. So my first introduction to plants was right before COVID, and someone gave me this little baby succulent cutting. And I took it home, put it in soil, and within a year to 2 years, it grew into this huge aeonium with little babies coming off of it. And in another year, more. They just reproduce. So in this session, I'm going to talk about what are these succulents, what are some commonly grown ones, and how do you propagate them. And at the end, we'll do the succulent wreath. So if you were in my class and you were a little third grader and I'm saying, oh, we're out in the desert, it's so dry, it's parched, there's no water, we didn't bring any water, how can we survive? All the third graders are going to be pointing to what? The cactus, you'll be saved. And that giant saguaro is filled with water. So even little kids know that succulents have water, and they could be as big as that saguaro, or they could be tiny, tiny, tiny little ones that you hold in your hand. And so what are succulents? They're just juicy plants. They store water in their stems and their leaves. They can store water for weeks, months, that saguaro for a couple of years, and they'll still thrive. Now, there are a lot of succulent families out there, over 10,000 different types. So I'm only going to go over a few of them that are the most common. And I'm going to be weaving into it some of the propagation techniques for each kind. And of course, if you're going to propagate, do as the experts say and clean your tools. It's always a good idea. And just to talk about that succulent soil, because succulents store water in their leaves, the number one thing that's going to kill them, too much water. And so you can buy cactus mix at the store, but a tiny bag is really expensive. So it's going to be less expensive to make your own. And you just need a combination of soil that holds nutrients, but it drains well. It's really light and airy because you need that oxygen in that soil. So if the soil's too wet, the roots are going to rot. So holds nutrients, that's this organic side. You could have peat moss, potting soil, cocoa coir, compost, forest products, anything that'll hold that and provide nutrients. And on that non-organic side, perlite, crushed granite, sand, pumice. And I put vermiculite not so much with succulents, because vermiculite tends to hold water. Perlite doesn't hold the water. And with succulents, you don't need things that are going to hold the water. It has to dry out, the soil has to dry out completely in between waterings, totally, completely. And the mix, I use whatever I have on hand. If I've got cocoa coir or peat moss, I'll use maybe half of that, or half potting soil, and the other half I might throw in perlite. The combination is really flexible. So I'll be talking about different ways to propagate. I will not be talking about seeds because that's really slow, but I will be talking about dividing them by the roots, just taking a cutting of a stem, tearing off some leaves, and my favorite is the head chop. Let's just chop off the head. Now, one common succulent family is the Asparagiaceae. And so you've got your agave, yucca, snake plant. They're filled with water. They're succulents. But not everything in that Asparagiaceae family is a succulent. So asparagus is in the family. It's really succulent to eat, but it's not considered a succulent. For snake plant cuttings, you can see someone took a leaf, put it in soil, took a leaf, put it in water. It both worked, or they can chop up the leaf into smaller pieces and put it right in the soil. And I'll tell you later why that works. And the reason why I tend to go just to the soil and not to the water, you think about hardening off your little seedling. You put it into the sunlight or into some filtered sunlight for half hour, an hour, bring it back indoors, put it out a little longer, bring it back indoors. You transition it very carefully. The same thing with water. If I plant it in soil, I don't have to transition it. And I'm lazy and I thrive on neglect. If I grow them in water, those roots, like Mary said, when you transplant it into soil, now you have to gradually tend to it so it gets acclimatized. And I've lost so many plants going from water to soil because I didn't tend to the water needs. And it went too quickly from water to dry. So it's up to you and how attentive you are. The next is the Aizoaceae family, and more commonly the ice plants. And supposedly they'll thrive all year outside in this zone. I've lost so many in the winter, so now I treat them more as an annual. So I'll just take cuttings. I'll just snip them into pieces, stick them in the soil, and now from one tiny little clump, I've got lots and lots of these ice plants that would be so easy for the plant sale. Aloe, yes. Yes. So the question is it good to treat them as a house plant annual, and in this fall, bring them in or clip some and then start them inside? That would be perfect. And I have a greenhouse, and so that's where I do mine, but I also do a lot of propagating inside. So that would be perfect. So the Aloaceae has your Aloe haworthia. And these are so easy to propagate. Now, the pups, you're going to hear them, babies, pups, offset, offshoot, a lot of different terms, hens and chicks, the chicks, but they all mean the baby. So in the top one, there's the original plant, the pup, and you can see that they were carefully cut off with some of the stem and planted up. So by division or just by leaf cuttings, a great way to get that aloe. Apocynaceae family, the plumeria, and this Hoya Carey. Raise your hand if you've seen these in the store, especially around Valentine's Day. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. Now, the Vinca periwinkle. It's often confused as a succulent. I've confused it as a succulent because at first I was hearing that it was one. It's not a succulent, but it's in the same family, and it's highly drought tolerant. And it's got these waxy leaves, which makes them look like a succulent. And I went all summer with this invasive plant. I was going to not water it. I was going to get rid of it because it took over everything. But because they're so drought tolerant, they survived. They survived. The Bromeliaceae, these are your air plants. And I love the little air plants, but we don't want to put them in the soil. They're used to growing on the trees in the jungles and using those little root-like things to attach themselves. So I like to splurge on nice little ways to display them that don't have soil. And then once a week, I gather up all my air plants, plop them in a tub of water for 10 minutes, an hour, sometimes longer if I forget. And then I just shake them off, put them back, and they're good to go. The thing about a lot of these succulents, think about where cactus are growing, not in very fertile soil. So that's another reason that I love succulents, is they don't have the need for a lot of fertilizer and nutrition. But yes, you can. Their growing season is all different. But spring, summer, you can fertilize them, but probably not with a high nitrogen, because then you're going to get something like this, tall and leggy. You want something that's going to be more the phosphorus and potassium that's going to develop that root structure, just the strong, the strength versus the height. But yeah, you can feed them every so often, but they're also very tolerant to not having a lot of fertilizer. The cactus family, they come in all sizes and shapes. I usually stay away from them because they're prickly, but others just love them. And these are also great by the pads or leaves. You can just twist them off, cut them off. You see it right up here. Let that end callus over. Because if you don't let it callus over and you plop it in water right away, what's it going to do? Suck up the water. It's already filled with water. Now you're giving it too much water and it can rot. And that's why we let it callus. And some plants can callus over in a few hours, a day or two. Others, if they're really huge, it might take a week or more. I did ones like this. I cut off the top, and a couple months later, I thought, oh my goodness, I left those, and I came back and they were growing some roots. They were just fine, wilted a little bit. So Mary was talking about the Christmas cactus, Thanksgiving, Easter cactus. You can just take little cuttings, let it callus a little bit, or put it in soil. And I just put it in dry soil because I sometimes like skipping the steps and I take risks of bacteria and things getting in. But often I'll plant it in dry soil and I just won't water it for a week or two, because it doesn't need water until the roots grow. And the roots aren't going to grow in the first couple of weeks. It may take 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then I can water it because it's getting its water from that leaf. The spurge family. I planted beautiful spurge in my raised bed, and a year or two later, the whole thing was filled. And then I read it's an invasive spurge, and wear your gloves because you cut it and it's toxic inside. And then I got rid of all the spurge. Portulaceae, this moss rose, really beautiful. And then raise your hand if you've eaten purslane. Yeah, purslane is a succulent. And if you cut some of these stems, it will start to root. That's why it'll just start growing like crazy. And there are a lot of people who love purslane and a lot of cultures. This is a valuable commodity. However, this is not a succulent. It's a lookalike. It's spotted spurge. And I've got this growing all over my yard. You could see those little dark lines on it. It's toxic. It's not a succulent. And what often happens is you have purslane, the beautiful edible plant, growing right by the spotted spurge, which is not a succulent and it's toxic. So just be careful about those two. The Crassulaceae family is the one that I just love. Most of these are going to be your indoor plants, and I take them out in May and I bring them in before all the rains start. Some of these are wonderful outside all year, some of them indoors. You have your Gollum jade, different crassula, campfire, and your jade. Jade is one of the easiest plants to grow and to propagate. Raise your hand if you have jade plants. Yeah. You have one jade plant, you will have many, many. Because they propagate through stem cuttings and even the leaf. So I just like to cut it above a place that has two leaves coming out. I just cut the stem and I plop it into dry soil. Or I set it aside and wait about a week, and then I'll plop it into soil. The leaves fall out, I just put it at the base of the plant. And eventually, those will grow roots and grow new plants. It'll take a little bit longer. Here's a kalanchoe. There's a mother of thousands. And see all those tiny little plants growing on the big leaf? Each one of those will create another plant. And your kalanchoe, love this plant in the store. And I didn't realize that this is a succulent. And so it's going to be easy then to cut the stems and the leaves, let it just callus, plop it back into soil. It's getting the water from its leaves. So after a couple of weeks, you can give it some water in the soil. Has to dry out in between. It doesn't like its roots wet all the time. But this is a wonderful one to propagate by the leaf or the stem cuttings. Here's your Graptivaria. They're plumper. A lot of water inside. And now the two most common, your sedum. These are your cold hardy in this zone. They can live outdoors all year. And they don't mind in this climate getting their feet wet. And then you have your Echeveria aeoniums. The aeonium is one that gets really large. These ones I bring out in May and bring them back in September before the rains start. So the sedum propagation is super, super easy. And you've got the ones like the dragon's blood. You've got your spillers that will go down the pot. And then you have your ones like your sedum. Those are the tall ones that will get the beautiful flowers. And they're outdoors all year. Even though the sedum looks like it might die down at the end of the year, boom, it comes right back up. So division is one of the most common ones. You've got a large bunch of sedum. All you have to do is dig it out, separate it. It'll have its roots, plop it right back in. If you don't water it right away, no big deal. It's getting its water from those leaves. Eventually, though, they like water, just not all the time. Here's another sedum. Take a look at the little roots. Can you see those hairs growing off the stem? So if you just lay it on the soil, those roots are going to find their way and start growing new plants. And take a look here. The leaves have fallen off. Wonderful, because each one of those eventually will grow the little roots and you'll get new plants. So if you do have a stem, yes, you can poke a hole and plant it, but you can also just lay it on top of the soil. The sedum, the autumn joy. Raise your hand if you have autumn joy at home. Oh my goodness, I love this one. And this was the first year that I thought, okay, I'm gonna try propagating this. So I cut some stems and I took some leaves and I took off the lower leaves for the stem. And then I just plopped them into soil, dry soil, or I could wait till they calloused. And then I did the same thing with the leaves. And by golly, both of them started growing new leaves. And then I took that flower head. And yeah, you can dry them upside down, gather the seeds. But I thought I'm going to have this as a nice bouquet on my table because it'll last a long, long time. And then after weeks, it started getting roots also. Every part. So your sempervivum with propagation's really easy, and you often hear of them called hens and chicks. And so with the division, all you have to do is separate them out. They'll have little roots, plant them back in. You can see the little roots there. Just pull them out. They're pretty tough. But all these little babies that don't have roots, you can cut them off too. And you can just put them right back on the soil. Or if they're connected to the mother hen, they'll grow. But I might want to start some somewhere else. And I can just put those on the soil. They'll eventually get their roots. And then you just plant them. Now, the one thing about all those sempervivum you have outside, hens and chicks, they're monocarpic, which means a death bloom. So once you see those pretty flowers coming from that mother hen, that's the end of her life. She's making those seeds. I know it seems really sad, doesn't it? But look at all the babies. She's produced tons and tons of babies. So it's okay. She's going to keep on going. Now, some species of kalanchoe and aloe are monocarpic. Most aeonium hybrids, the big ones, are monocarpic. So if it starts to flower, it's by the end of its life. And you can try cutting off the flower, see if that helps. But most succulents are polycarpic. So if they flower, no problem. They'll flower numerous times during their life. So stem propagation, Echeveria. These are ones that I'll just take a look at the stem. I don't even have to worry if I've got roots on it. I could just cut the stem. And then let it callus over a little bit. Plop it in dry soil. I don't have to water it for 2-3 weeks because it's going to take a while for those little roots to form. So think about cutting a rose or a daffodil. If you don't put them in water, 30 minutes later, what will happen? They'll wilt. That's why you need those in water. But the succulents, they're getting their water from the leaves. Callus them so they don't absorb any more water, and they'll be just fine. So here you can get a lot of new babies quickly. Leaf propagation. With the leaf, you gently wiggle the leaf from side to side, and you try to get it off cleanly. So up here, I've got a big succulent, and afterwards, you can try coming up here, and I like to start with the ones on the bottom, and you can try wiggling them side to side, up and down, until you get it cleanly off the stem. And you can take some of these home then to see if they'll grow. Just leave them out on a plate for a few days, then you can put it on top of dry soil. I've left them out for weeks, even months, and then I see the roots starting to grow. Now, the reason why you want to get it off cleanly is because where the stem is and where the leaf is on this plant are the stem cells, the undifferentiated cells. And those ones will think, okay, I can grow into a stem, I can grow into roots, I can grow into leaves. So they've got a lot of options where they're the stem cells, and they're held in something called meristematic tissue. So I'm just going to say stem cell for short. Now, where it meets the stem is where a lot of succulents have the most stem cell. You take it to where you've torn the leaf, well, you've taken off the part that has the most stem cells. So, aloe. The first time I tried to propagate aloe, I cut off tops. I cut off ones on the bottom. The tops just rotted away. The bottoms were more successful in growing the roots. Think where the stem cells are going to be in an aloe plant. where it was connected to the stem. Look at this snake plant. Snake plant, I would cut it, plant it in dry soil, cut the next piece, plant it, cut the next piece, plant it. And Mary told you about making that little V, which helps more surface area. And I was successful in growing maybe about half of them, but still getting more snake plants from one. Where do you think the stem cells are located in a snake plant? Throughout the stem. That's why it's more successful there in the snake plant and not in the aloe. So now the question that I start asking myself, where are those stem cells? So I loved it when I got this little Hoya Carey for Valentine's Day. And I took care of it. And it stayed like that for months, for years. It grew roots. But that's what a Hoya Carey plant looks like. It should be growing as a vine, all those beautiful heart-shaped. What I didn't realize, the stem cells aren't at the bottom of that little heart. They're in the node, the part that sticks out are the nodes. And that's where in a lot of plants, the stem cells are concentrated. So in the Hoya Carey, to propagate it, I need to make sure I've got the nodes if I want to grow a plant that looks like that. So I can give other people just a little leaf. So again, cleanly removed from the stem, torn. I'll have much more success when they're cleanly taken off. So you let it callus for a while, and it heals the wound. It's like you don't want to stick your arm in if you cut your hand right into soil. You clean it off first. So you want to heal the wound. You could get rot, water absorption, pathogens. So plants are the same as us. They need to be treated tenderly. But look I've got the rosette. I've got leaves. I plop them on soil, and they'll all start growing. Not all of them, but a good number of them. Here's a beautiful echeveria waiting to be propagated. I took off the leaves gingerly, laid them down, cut that stem, plopped it right in the middle, and out of one, look how many you can get. And because I don't like to throw out the leaves, I end up with hundreds. It's so easy to get a lot of succulents quickly. So that leaf will eventually start to have roots. And it's sitting on a plate getting the roots. I don't need to mist the leaf. And I don't need to do anything until I start seeing the root hairs. Then I might mist the roots. Or I'll put it then in soil. You could just lay it on top. The roots will find its way down. Or you can plant it shallow in the soil. But it really doesn't need the water until it starts producing those roots. And then take a look at the leaf. After the roots, you're going to start getting that rosette, or about the same time, it starts to lose its water, turn brown. And I just leave it. It's getting its nutrients, it's getting its water, and eventually it'll fall off. And there you can see, I just laid them on top of the soil. The roots will find their way down. Other times I plant them. Here's the big aeonium. You see it's offset right here, it's pup. Here's another one, and you can see the pup growing on the side. And there's another aeonium. These don't have as fleshy leaves. They're a lot more flimsy, but they still have a lot of water in it. So all I do then is cut off those offsets, snip them off, let them callus over, And then, so I took it in the middle and I just plopped it on soil. And eventually it will grow its roots. Do I need to water this one right away? No, you don't have to worry about it. And sometimes it's weeks, or when I start seeing it droop, then it's, oh, I've got to water it. So if your aeonium is getting too tall, it might mean it needs more light. It's seeking out the light. But what's wonderful about this is that it has stem cells in a lot of places on this plant. So with this, it's going to be so easy. I don't have to worry about the roots. I can just figure out where I want it, cut it off, let this callus over. I can take off some of the bottom leaves, because where I take off the leaves, that's where the stem cells are going to be. And hopefully I'll be growing new baby pups out of here. And then let it callus over or plop it in dry soil.
Or do you cut the stem that you cut off? Could you cut that in pieces and get it as well?
Try it. Sometimes I have, and I just plop this in dry soil, and I'll definitely put this one back in. Sometimes it works and it grows more. Other times it doesn't.
I had one of those and it was really pretty purple and it got gigantic, but it kept losing everything down below and finally it stopped there.
Yeah, and the bottom leaves might get dry and they'll die. Just pull those off, cut the stem, plant it. But now here's my favorite. Head chop, beheading it. Because one of the fastest ways to get new plants, aeoniums don't reproduce by leaf cuttings as well. I tried the first year and didn't get much. But the fastest way, faster than the leaves, is starting with one of those rosettes. So you can get fishing line, wrap it around, dental floss, pull it, and behead it. Or you can use your pruners, and you can just chop it off like this. Pull off some of the bottom leaves. And where you pull off the bottom leaves, that's more room in the soil, but also I like to pull them off here and there, even around the top, because that's where stem cells are, and that's where I probably will get more babies and pups rather than just the one. Then I plop this in soil. Ooh, now I've got this. I'll just take off some leaves here and there, plop this in soil, and away you go. So here, pulling off some of the bottom leaves. And this is my head chop. I put it in soil. And this one here, I pull off a couple of leaves, and it will eventually grow new rosettes. I love this one, and it hurts. I head chopped it. But then I put it right in soil, and the other portion, pull off some leaves and grow some more. So the question was, but will the stem work? Experiment. Try it. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So with this succulent, I had no idea because the leaf went all the way around. So I chopped it off, and then it started growing a new succulent. Other times, I just put the stem in. Sometimes it worked and started growing new ones. This mother of thousands, I don't need thousands now. I don't propagate that anymore because you get so many. But take a look here. Your stem question, will the stem propagate? A lot of times it will. So just play with it and see what happens. Do you have to water this right away? No. Wait and see if some, you won't see the roots, but eventually you might see some leaves. Otherwise, it'll wither and die and dry out. So from one, you'll get a lot very quickly. So I started out with the one that someone gave me, and then for my Master Gardener project as a trainee, I did succulents. I bought about a dozen small little succulents for a couple dollars each. And from that, I quickly got hundreds because I just didn't have the heart to throw out even a leaf. And what's fun is be creative. Be creative in how you're planting them. My husband's baby shoe was in a box for 50 years, 60 years. I took it out and figured, oh, well, I'm going to try it. And it works beautifully. And succulents are great in pots that don't have holes. They're about the only plant because you've got to let it dry out completely before you water. And you don't want to water till that soil is soaking. So if you water very moderately, you can use pots without drainage holes. It's always better to have drain holes. But I love different planters now. And this is one I love, the little pumpkin, the little mini pumpkins, and decorating those with succulents at Thanksgiving. But because those succulents are going to take a month to start growing roots, and then they grow the roots in that sphagnum moss. At Christmas time, I just put in a little Christmas decoration, and it lasts the seasons. Here was a little bird's nest that fell, and so I tried to create another one using some of the lichen that falls. And this was one that has the offshoots. My son got married last May, and my daughter-in-law was working in Germany. She came back 2 weeks before the wedding, and she said she didn't order a bouquet. I thought, no problem. I'm going to cut off these succulents. I'm going to stick floral wire in it, wrap it. I was able to do that a week before the wedding. Now I've got these stems. I don't have to water them because I get the water from the leaves. And then the day of the wedding, I just stuck in some fresh flowers, and she had her little bouquet. And then after the wedding, I took it apart. And I put the succulents in a pot, and this is what it looks like about a month ago. So I didn't lose any of those. Would I have lost $100, $200 bouquet? Yeah, but I've got all my succulents. And my son said, are we supposed to wear something too, the groomsmen? I said, no worries. So I got a little baby succulent, and I put wire through it, wrapped it with floral tape a week before, and they all had their little boutonnieres. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to wait until to order. And then they thought, well, we should have some decorations. And I said, no worries. I've got a lot of succulents. So I made planters, like 30 to 50 planters for the table decorations, because they're so easy to do. And then I made a bunch of these succulent wreaths. And this is almost a year later, where the succulents are still thriving. If they don't, no big deal. I can always replace it, but these succulents did really well. So this is the wonderful world of succulents, from large to small, different kinds. But here's your test now. This is my propagation box, one of them. And inside my propagation box, I have my nice little heart-shaped, what are these called? Are these pothos or philodendrons? Isn't that pothos? Isn't that pretty? And this was many months ago, and they've got the roots, and I haven't done anything except have sphagnum moss that was moist and my cover. And at first I was really good. Every day I would take the cover off so I'd get new air. Then a few days would go by, then a week or two would go by, and then we moved. So I found this sitting in the garage for a couple of weeks. But a lot of your tender plants need a humidity dome. They need to be moist because you cut off those roots, they have no way to get water. They have to get them through their leaves, and that's why you need the humidity. Or I'll use just a regular tray and one of the big humidity domes. And then I'll plant up my azalea, take cuttings of my azalea, weigelia, my Pyrus japonica, and different plants, and I'll put it in the humidity dome as long as it's got the little moisture each day, no problem. But if it looks dry, I could just pour some water in the bottom, and then it's fine for months until it's got the roots, and then I can start transitioning it a little bit outside. But why do I have humidity domes on my azalea, Pyrus, weigelia, pothos? But I don't have any humidity domes when I do my succulents. Where do the succulents get its water? Yeah. They have no way of getting water if you cut off the roots with the pothos, but here from the leaves. And so that's one of the main differences why you need humidity domes with a lot of your cuttings, but why you don't with your succulents. You will kill them with too much water. So, summarize, they're juicy plants. They're able to store water for weeks, months, years in saguaros. There are a ton of them, but they're so much fun. And now we're going to move on to the succulent wreath. Again, this one was made a year ago. For those of you on Zoom, I'm just going to quickly go over what supplies we're using, what we're doing. For those of you at the tables, you can start whenever you feel comfortable. But what I did was I took a wreath, and I'm going to tell you how I made wreaths. I used floral wire. Thanks to Mary Dessel, I had a lot of moss. I used some sphagnum moss also, and I just tied it on, wrapped it around, and then tied it off. You could do the whole thing. You could do part of it. You could do it however you want. And I also gave you a little extra wire so you could make a hanger to hang it on the door, to hang it on the window, to lay it on a table in a sunny place, and then you could put potted plants in the middle of it. So there are all sorts of things you could do there. I also gave you a bow that I made out of wired burlap. I love it because you can manipulate that all you want to make it more rosette form. I also gave you floral adhesive. I've glued on succulents with hot glue guns. It's easier in this environment just to use floral adhesive, which is strong, it dries quickly, and then you don't have that hot glue possibly burning your hands. But with the hot glue guns, I could put glue, and you could put the floral glue even on the stem that's newly cut. And all your succulents in front of you were cut about 5 days ago, so they're probably calloused over. So you could put the glue right on the cutting, you could put it around, you could put it on the leaves, any way you want to make it stay down will work. I gave you a chopstick so you can poke a hole in the sphagnum moss, and these little pins, these are floral pins. So it helps then to put the floral pin around the stem to help secure it. You can also glue it, there's no right or wrong, just play with it. I also gave you, yes, Mary?
People who didn't get a wreath, if you want to watch through this, that's great. But plant propagation, where you can take your plants home with you for free, we'll get those started after the wreath demonstration. So if you want to sit through this, that's free. If not, come back to me and we'll play with the plants in a little bit.
So in one of your bowls, you have a variety of succulents. And I just cut them. They're calloused. You can glue them in. You don't have to worry about watering this for a few weeks. It's going to take a while for it to grow its roots. But I've also given you a bowl of non-succulents, plastic plants, because be creative. You could fill things in with plastic plants. My neighbor grows hydrangeas. She dried them. And so you have a special gift from her of a little hydrangea that you could put on there. So you could easily add your dried flowers. There are also leaves. Glue on the succulent leaves that fall off. Glue on the fake leaves as well. I also gave you some things from the yard, just some sticks with some lichen and moss. And there's a cuttings from curly willow. And I've got those up here. So if anyone wants some of that. So the way you can start, I like to start with the biggest ones first. I just poke a hole with the chopstick. I put glue on the succulents and I plop it in. Or you can also use one of these floral pins to help secure it. But use a lot of the glue, even on the leaves, on the bottom of the stem, around the stem. To water it, I love this type of little watering thing because I can water the sphagnum moss or the moss. The succulents, they're not going to be soaking in the water, but the roots eventually that grow into the moss do need it. So sometimes I'm just going to put this in the sink, get the moss all wet, let it sit for an hour, and then I'll hang it back up. Otherwise, I'll use something like this. So, grapevines. Many of you have grapevines. And there are different kind of vines also. So here's the way that I've made the vines. So grapevines went over to Mary Dessel's and then to another friend's. And while the leaves had fallen, they were going to get ready to prune it. I like to put things in a bucket because it's going to start shaping it in a round form. Others of you just cut it and you can put it in a big tub of water for a few hours overnight. But I like to cut it and wind it up when they're pliable, even during a rain, after rain. So here's one, and it doesn't matter what size they are. You don't have to have a form. I like to start with the big end, and you could put it in whatever size you want. And then you can just start wrapping it around. And at first, it may look nothing like a circle. But then as you start adding more and more, you can put them in wherever you want. And then you start wrapping them. It starts to look more like a circle. And if it sticks out, your next one, you can sort of wrap around that. I like to sort of ball them up in a little circle inside that helps me to wrap it around. And then when you come to one that's sticking out, ooh, I want to secure that down. And then you keep going however thick you want it. And then when you get to the end, just find a little place, tuck it in, and then go to your next one. Wonderful way to include your kids, grandkids. It's so relaxing. I went out to the garden and was going to put the garden to bed. And my husband said, is it all put to bed? I said, no, but I cut clematis and I made a wreath. Or I cut red flowering currant, which was not long enough, but I made a wreath. I cut my thornless blackberry and made wreaths. My green belt is, it's got so much of this honeysuckle entwined in everything. I started pulling it off. And I realized, it's a vine. I'm going to make a wreath. One of my favorite was, I wasn't good at harvesting my arugula, so it grew and went to seed. So I went to chop and drop it, and then I started pulling it off, and it was this huge mess. And I thought, I wonder if it would make a wreath. And it made a wreath. And then I don't know if this was an onion or garlic or leek or whatever, but I thought, I wonder if it'll make a wreath. And it did. And then just to be sure, I just wrapped it with something else. But that's what makes it so much fun, is just playing with it. And then this is the scourge of my yard, English ivy. Raise your hand if you have that. Yeah. So I started pulling like always, and I'm just, oh, look how long these are. I'm never going to get this out. And now I start pulling them, and I think, wow, look how long this is. Oh, I can make a wreath. And it's changed my whole attitude now about getting rid of this English ivy, which I'll still do. But now I can make a wreath, and I can just run my hand along it, and off come the leaves. But imagine getting kids out there now to pull it. Whole change of attitude when they can make something beautiful out of it. So anyway, that was my process of making the wreaths. So you have mostly blackberry, but there are some other types of wreaths there. I even tried it with bamboo. Some things work, some things don't. So go ahead now and start poking holes and using your glue, floral pins. We have more, I think, supplies. And if you want some curly branches, come on up. And then in any stage, feel free to go back and propagate your little humidity dome of plants. And if you don't finish here, feel free to take it home.